You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth, the show that reveals facts, truth, research, and statistics and never messes around. With your hosts, Taylor Phillips, Ed Smith, Frank Vasner, and Buck Geno. We lay down the entire truth about everything regarding your Detroit and Michigan sports teams, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no coddling, no pop culture, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Follow me, Taylor Phillips, on Twitter at DT2Phillips with 2 L's. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter at EdSmith313. Follow Frank Vasner at Frank_Vasner, VAJCNER. And follow Buck Geno on Twitter at BuckGeno3rd. Also like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth, and join our Facebook group with the same name. The hosts of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast do not take any suggestions or criticism from any member of its audience on how it should be run. It is up to the host to decide what they want to cover. They also do not intend to be any amount of popular in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Additionally, the views of the audience, right or wrong, do not reflect the actual truth revealed on this program.
Episode 293 is in session. Taylor Phillips, Buck Geno. The Week in Review of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast on Spreaker, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio. Got a lot to recap again, except no college football, but we do have bowl games selected for Michigan, Michigan State, and Central Michigan. But first off, let's transition to pro football here. Let's start with pro football.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
The Lions suffered almost a blowout. They gave up 44 points at the Baltimore Ravens, and they lose 44-20 in a game where Stafford gets hurt again, but only suffered a bruised hand, so he's once again considered not injured. His knee was getting better after getting injured on Thanksgiving Thursday against the Minnesota Vikings, but the Baltimore Ravens gave the Lions way more than they can handle. The Lions' defense was once again not up to the task, and Stafford was left unprotected again by this offensive line. T.J. Lang rejoined the lineup after suffering a foot injury. He returned from a foot injury. But Amir Abdullah was ruled out, and so was Dwayne Washington. Amir Abdullah was reportedly having a neck injury after the Vikings game, and the Lions didn't put up any points in the first half, and they tried to make a comeback, but they just fell short, and they just continued giving up more points, and the Ravens pulled away and sealed it. The Lions now fall to 6-6, still in the playoff hunt, and tied with the Green Bay Packers at 6-6. The Packers catching up. They won with Brett Hundley, but the Lions are declining. It shows why that more and more Lions fans are wanting Jim Caldwell gone.
Well, if you look at the game today, and I talked about it last week on this broadcast, Lions had 10 days to prepare for this game. The Ravens had 5. Detroit played a Thanksgiving Day game last week, so they had a full day, 10 days before today's game. So they had to prepare, they had to rest. They were the better rested team. They should have been the more prepared team, and they were not. And the Ravens were coming off a Monday night game into a Sunday afternoon game, 1 o'clock kickoff. So, regardless of talent, regardless of, any type of, any sort of metric that you want to throw out there, Detroit should have been the better team today. And for them to come out and perform like they did in the first half is inexcusable. It shows that this coaching staff has not prepared their team well. It shows that these players they've, I guess, tuned out this coaching staff. So anything that they're saying is not getting through, because it's pretty evident that the last 5 games they've played, they've been down by double-digit points in each of the first halves at some point. And for that to happen is right on the coaches. You can talk about execution. You can talk about anything that you want. The fact that Jim Caldwell and his staff have come out and they have basically been steamrolled in the first half of the last 4 to 5 games. To double check the stat which one that was, but regardless, they are not prepared. And really, when you look at the whole game, the Ravens started out fast, and yes, the Lions did make a little bit of a comeback in the third quarter, but in the fourth quarter, when it typically is the Lions' time to shine, the Ravens, who have given up the fewest points in the fourth quarter in the National Football League, put 24 points on the Lions. Now, granted, a defensive touchdown was part of that because Jake Rudak was in for the injured Matt Stafford, got hit as he threw and made a bad decision, and that was the last score of the game. But still, I mean, you're giving up 17 points in the fourth quarter of a game that you have to win. Have to. You got back to within a touchdown. You got back to 20-13, and you got it to a one-score game in the fourth quarter, which, if you're the Lions, granted your first half was terrible, and it's not something that you want to keep doing, and today it comes back again and bites them in the ass because they don't prepare, they don't come out and play like they should in the first half, but they're still within one touchdown in the fourth quarter. Still. Somehow, by a miracle. And then they go in the fourth quarter and just mess the bed. I mean, it was just a pitiful performance. And the comments after the game by a lot of the players, and I've been looking on Twitter, guys like Kyle Menke and Justin Rogers, who actually do a good job of being a beat writer for a Detroit sports team. I mean, the comments they're getting from guys like Golden Tate and Darius Slay, it's pretty apparent that this team has quit on Jim Caldwell and his staff because they're ill-prepared. They come out flat. They don't have any sort of, it looks like, game plan that they've talked about before they get out there. This is a team that had 10 days to prepare. Now, my disclaimer is I'm not a Lions fan. I'm a Bears fan, and that's much worse right now because John Fox is an idiot. But to see the level of ill-preparedness and just plain out buffoonery that the Lions will give you every single week. Everybody got their hopes up when they started out 3-0. This is it. They got to the playoffs last year. They faded, but this is a new team. Bob Quinn's the GM. It doesn't matter. They extended Jim Caldwell, who was at the helm for the last 4 games of the season last year, that they lost all the teams that were in the playoffs and all the teams that were above 500.
Yeah, I know.
And you get to this year, and everybody's so happy, and then they lose to Atlanta on a kind of a fluky play with the runoff, and okay, you started out poor, you tried to make a comeback. Same thing against Carolina. Started out poor, tried to make a comeback. There's a pattern here, and it's not the fact that the officials are out to get you, or it's not the fact that Matthew Stafford is hurt. It's the fact that you come out every single game and you start with a half-ass effort. Not one time that I can see the Lions this past year, I cannot remember sitting down to watch a game and look at them in the first half and thinking, boy, they've really got it together. Not one time. And even in their 3 wins, they didn't have that. It's just pathetic. And for the team to sit there and say that Jim Caldwell is the coach for the next 4 years, come on. They extended him for 5 years because he made the playoffs twice in his 3-year tenure, which I know the bar is pretty low for the Lions, but you gotta see the forest through the trees. And Jim Caldwell, before this season, it was evident that he didn't have the teams prepared for big games. It was evident that he did not have a good hold on the locker room, and it's still showing today. And they showed their ass again because the Ravens came out and blew them out of the water, got to Stafford, did everything they needed to do against the Lions that the scouting reports tell them to. The Lions had 10 days to do whatever they had to do to be a productive football team, and they shit the bed. So if you want Jim Caldwell at the helm of your team, that's fine. But just know that you're going to get that product every single time because it just happens. And it happens way too often and way too similarly for that to be a coincidence. It's the same thing every time. They try to come out and they try to run the ball. It doesn't work because they can't block. Then they get behind. Then they have to throw and they can't pass block, so Matt Stafford gets banged around. And I've always been a big Stafford detractor when he had guys like Calvin Johnson and Nate Burleson, guys that actually could catch the football. But now that he's got Marvin Jones and Golden Tate and whoever else they can find to throw out there, he's gotten better as far as being a leader and a quarterback because he's forced to make decisions based on keys that he reads, making his actual progressions instead of, Calvin Johnson's 40 yards downfield, I'll just throw it up to him and he'll probably catch it. So I think Matt Stafford in the last 2 years has actually grown into a top 10 quarterback. I never thought he was one before Calvin Johnson retired, but he has stepped up his game, but his franchise, his coach, his GM, his owner have all let him down because he is not getting the job done. And it is, we can talk about if he's elite. I don't think he's elite, but I think he's better than what he's being able to show now because it is tough to throw a football when you're wearing guys as a hat. And I think if you're a Lions fan, you got to look at this and say, this is just unacceptable. 4 more years of this, it can't happen. But if Stafford is hurt and he misses games and they miss the playoffs, I guarantee you, as other people have said, they will use that as the excuse for the reason they didn't make the playoffs. They'll keep Caldwell based on that theory, and they'll get the same stuff or worse next year. Because everybody talked about this year how the Lions won free agency. They got this great offensive line. There's going to be no problem for Stafford. Shit, he's on the ground more than he was last year, and they didn't have a good line last year. They are a dumpster fire. It all points back to the coaching staff because Bob Quinn went out and got the best players available for the Lions system. He truly did. When I looked at their team on paper, you're thinking, boy, if they could just get some coaching, they'll be good. They went out and spent money on guys like Rick Wagner, TJ Lang, kind of banged up, but that's not the point. The point is they went out and got what they needed. They literally went out and filled almost every gap that they could possibly fill in free agency. And they're still a bumbling 500 football team because they are not prepared well by their coaching staff. So it goes to show you that you can get as many players as you want. You can spend as much money, but if you don't have a coach that's worth a crap, you're not going anywhere. And Jim Caldwell, if you're a Lions fan, you should have wanted him gone last year. You shouldn't have wanted him extended, and he's proving why now. They've won 6 games. I am baffled on how they won those 6 games based on the performances they've had the last 2 weeks. Baffled.
Yeah, they just want to prove that.
They barely beat the Chicago Bears, my team, who is bad, who are bad. Terrible. They lost to the 49ers today. The 49ers.
That's how bad the Bears are, yep.
And they barely beat those guys. I mean, come on. You just, if you're a Lions fan and you thought this year was going to be an improvement because they went out and got a bunch of guys, boy, I mean, I kind of feel sorry for you because there was no way this team was going to go to the playoffs with Jim Caldwell as the head coach. I said it, and look at that. It's come to fruition because they stink. They're 6-6, which means they're still in the
Yeah. And Martha Ford and the Ford family decided to keep Jim Caldwell, and they and Bob Quinn, the general manager, and Rod Wood, the team president, signed Caldwell to that 5-year extension. I blame everyone in that front office and Bill Keenest. He's involved in it too.
I mean, the thing is, Martha Ford wanted him extended, and Bob Quinn, he's the GM, and it's still, he didn't want to extend him. I don't think. Why would he? It's happens to GMs when they come in. The first thing they do is they fire the coach. Why? Because they don't want that guy. There's a reason that there's a new GM. Probably because your team stinks. And part of that goes back to the coach. So your first move as GM is either fire the coach or wait the year out so you can get rid of him and not have to pay 2 coaches. And then you go get your guy. And Martha Ford basically campaigning for Jim Caldwell to get an extension and giving it to him has handcuffed Bob Quinn, because Bob Quinn can get as many free agents as we've seen. He can draft, and the jury's still out on his drafting a little bit with some of the guys that he's drafted, but he got them a decent team. He got them a team that's better than 6-6 on paper. This team has been coached into oblivion by Jim Caldwell and his incompetent staff. And now Bob Quinn, he has to go to Martha Ford and say, hey, I know you like him, and I know we just gave him a boatload of money, but he's bad at his job, and I need to pay him for 4 years to not coach for us because he can't coach. And if you're a person like Martha Ford, you'd probably go in there and say, nope, I'm going to pay him, so I might as well coach.
Right.
And I really think that Quinn's stuck with him. And then, after that, it's, like I said, it's baffling to me how you would rehire him. It's baffling to me how John Fox stayed around this year for the Chicago Bears, because he is just as bad or worse than Jim Caldwell. And the thing is, with the NFC Central this year,
NFC North.
I keep saying the NFC Central because I'm old, and that's what it should be. But anyway, the NFC North.
The Nuke North.
Aaron Rodgers goes down. And immediately, just by default, you are now the second best team in that division, because Brett Hundley is not good at football. And he's going to lose more than he wins. And there's a reason that Aaron Rodgers is going to come back in week 15, medical clearance and all, because Brett Hundley ain't going to get it done. And if he can just steer the ship in at 7-7 and get the Packers 7-6 or maybe 6-7 and get Rodgers in for the last 3 games, they could even finish ahead of their Lions. How embarrassing is that?
How poetic would that be for the founder and editor-in-chief of the Detroit Sports Rag, Jeff Moss? He wanted the Lions to finish worse than they are right now, which is 6-6. He wanted the Lions to finish worse than 6 wins, like 3 or 4 wins.
Well, that's not going to happen, obviously, but I think the key is you have a team. I mean, the Bears don't count because there's a whole lot going on there. But the Packers, who lost Aaron Rodgers 4 weeks ago, are going to be able to perhaps be have a better record than you are. And you never missed, your starting quarterback never missed anything. How? I mean, it just makes no sense. You look at that team and you're like, how does this happen?
Yeah, it's just the Lions. The Lions just keep, regardless of whatever happens, even with Aaron Rodgers going down for most of the season, for most of the remainder of the season, the Lions still try to give it away because they're the fucking Lions, for God's sake. It's always the Lions. That's it. They don't want to win. They don't want to make the playoffs, because they definitely don't want to win a playoff game. One playoff win in now 61 years. as Jeff Moss hashtag. The Lions are still on the hunt, but they're probably gonna falter later on this season and lose to at least a couple good teams down the stretch.
Well, I mean, their schedule winds up for them favorably. The Ravens was the pivotal game because that was the only team that was at or above their level as far as wins and losses. Because the Ravens came into today having a record of 6-5. So today was the meeting of 2 6-5 teams. After that, the schedule gets much easier win and loss record wise for the Lions. But the problem is, I mean, the damage is done over the last 2 weeks. The damage is done. You had 6-4. You're staring at least 7-5 in the face with a split going into 4 games that you should win. And now, if Aaron Rodgers is coming back, I know that could change one of those, but still, you were staring 3 weeks ago. They were staring 10 wins in the face, at least. Now they might not get to 9. The last 2 weeks have been pivotal for them, and it just goes to show it's a microcosm of the Lions coaching staff, ownership, front office. You just keep naming things. They had it, and they came out in that Thanksgiving game at home and just laid an egg against the Vikings. Then they had 10 days to prepare for a team that was coming off a Monday night game, and they couldn't score a point in the first half. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, like you pointed out, they were not prepared at all by their coaching staff, especially Jim Comatose Caldwell, who just keeps giving the Lions inspirational quotes like Jim Leland did with the Tigers before the end of 2013, and just kind of like the old school. It's kind of like Jim Caldwell coaching the Lions old school football, and just giving some inspirational positive quotes, but he's not preparing them fundamentally.
No, I mean, anybody can find quotes on the internet and say them.
It's not going to do any good.
Oh, how about maybe figure out how to beat a team schematically and put your players in the best position to win. That's maybe the best start. I have all these motivational quotes, and yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, and I just think it's hilarious that before the season started, and even into the early part of the season when they were 3-0, I mean, I had to listen to a lot of it. And I kept telling people, number one, the first 3 games they played, they didn't play anybody. I mean, they played the Cardinals, who weren't very good at the time. They played the Giants, who were a complete wreck.
Only 2 wins.
And, yeah, I mean, basically. And then they lost to the Lions at home. Or the Lions. They lost to the Falcons at home.
They were
and then
good.
they went and played the Vikings, who gave them that game. The only points that the Lions scored in the second half were off of turnovers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how they won that game. Then they come back home, lose to the Panthers. Then they go to New Orleans and get the shit kicked out of them. I know it's
only to come back and fall short.
But that game was 45-7 in the third quarter.
Yeah.
So don't give me this stuff about how they made a comeback. Okay, great.
Yeah, and don't give us that shit about a win is a win. No, a win is not a win. Don't just take Mike Delaney's word for it. See for yourself, audience, Lions fans.
Yeah, I mean, just going down their season in review, they beat the Packers. Great job. That was Brownlee's second start. He didn't know what the hell he was doing. And the last 4 games, I just double checked it. The last 4 games, they've been down by double digits in the first half. Now, the teams that they've played are in order: the Browns, who still haven't won a game; the Bears, who at 3-9, I don't know how they got to 3, but they did, and they might not get any more. The Vikings, who are really the only good team on that list, and then the Ravens, who they had 10 days to prepare for. 10. Not 7. Not 5 like the Ravens had. 10. Double the amount of time.
Double digits.
And they sat on their hands and came out in the first half and just got throttled.
Obliterated.
The team has quit. The team has quit on Jim Caldwell. Because either he doesn't know how to prepare them or they don't care to listen. Either way, this team is rudderless. And it's not going to get any better. The next game they have next week is against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay isn't really good this year, but they're playing on the road. And we know how well Detroit plays on the road historically. I know this year, somehow, they've been better on the road than they have at home. But
yeah, which is mind-boggling to me.
It's a road game. Then they have the Bears coming in on Saturday. Then they have the Bengals coming. Then they go play the Bengals in Cincy on Christmas Eve. Then they have the Lions or the Packers coming in to play the Lions on New Year's Eve for the season finale. It is not out of the question for them to lose 2 of those games. It's not.
Mm-mm.
For them to finish 8-8 is not out of the question. Because I look at it, the 2 teams they probably have the most chance of losing to are Cincinnati and Green Bay, just because of who they are. I don't think the Buccaneers, with a backup quarterback and virtually little talent left on that roster, and then the Bears are the same way. But the Bengals, I know that Marvin Lewis's team isn't that great, but still, I mean, they got some guys that can go up and get the football. That can make the life a little bit tough on the defensive secondary. And defensively, they're still missing guys. But, I mean, they have a chance, and it's a road game. It's December. Probably going to be bad weather. So that's the kind of stuff. I mean, they could win the next 2 games against Tampa Bay and Chicago, be 8-6. Get their hopes up again. And then that's my prediction. Actually, they're going to win the next 2 games. They're going to beat Tampa Bay. They're going to beat Chicago. And they're going to go to Cincinnati after they get back up to 8-6, get everybody all on the ladder again because, they won the last 2 games. All they got to do is hope for all these things to happen. They'll be in the playoffs, and then they're going to lay an absolute steaming pile at Cincinnati. That's my prediction. In the last game of the season against the Packers, it really doesn't matter because they won't be in the playoffs. I don't think the Packers will have enough gas to get there, but boy, it would be sweet if the Packers needed to win that game to get into the playoffs and they were able to beat the Lions and send them to 8-8. That's my prediction. Through the next 3 weeks, they're going to beat Tampa Bay, they're going to beat Chicago, people are going to get excited, and they're going to go to Cincinnati and lay an absolute pile because that's what they do.
Yeah, and get demolished by the Bengals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's my prediction.
Yep. And then week 17, they're playing Aaron Rodgers, who is projected to return in week 15, and the Packers at Ford Field. Aaron Rodgers has still got all kinds of weapons, like Donald Driver, Jordy Nelson. With Aaron Rodgers back, the Packers can somehow find their way into either getting close to the playoffs or even making the playoffs. Where the Lions, I see them finishing 8-8 as well, which still does not get the Lions into the playoffs because you gotta finish above 500 to get to at least get closer than that. And that's neither you nor I see that occurring the rest of this season.
No, and the other thing that you have to remember is for them, they don't own any wild card tiebreakers. They don't own any.
Can't hear you.
The first couple. Oh, sorry about that. They don't own many, if any, tiebreakers. So even if they were somehow tie a team, they're not going to be able to.
Still can't hear you.
Because they haven't made it. They haven't made a tiebreaker. They don't own any tiebreakers.
No, they don't. Just
people are going to. They can. Okay, great. You're going to get to 10-6, and there's 3 other teams at 10-6, which means that you're not going to be able to leap ahead of any of them.
No.
I mean, if you look at the playoff picture in the NFL, the NFC South probably sending 3 teams, and all of those teams have the tiebreaker because all of those teams beat the Detroit Lions in the regular season. The Saints, the Panthers, and the Falcons. And then the second wild card is either going to come out of the South, or if you go to tiebreakers, then you have the teams at 6-6, and then you have also the Seahawks who are at 7-4, and they're playing right now. So let's just say the Seahawks win the game tonight; they'll be at 8-4, which means that your second and first place wild card teams right now are 8-4. So Detroit, in theory, is 2 games back of the wild card with 4 to go. Do you see the Panthers, the Falcons, the Seahawks, and we'll even throw in the Cowboys at 6-6? Do you see all of those teams going 1-3 or worse over the next 4 games, and Detroit winning all of theirs? That's what you have to look forward to, because Detroit has to beat at least the Panthers and the Falcons by a game, because they don't hold tiebreakers in head-to-head, and that's the first one. So their next one is going to be division record, which the Lions actually might, depending on how everything shakes out, get to. But you have to hope that you beat them by a game and not have to have it come down to tiebreakers. So you would have to win all of your games, and they would have to go 1-3 or lose out.
Yeah.
And if you're confident in all of that happening, boy, I've got some property to sell you, because it's not happening. The Panthers and the Falcons aren't going 1-3 in the next 4 games. The Seahawks are not going to go 1-4 in their next 5 games, depending on the results of tonight.
Yeah, whoever thinks that it actually is happening, they're delusional sycophants.
Well, that's the other side that nobody ever remembers. It's, okay, you can win all of your games, but then those teams also have to lose. Now, granted, there'll be some interdivisional matchups between the Saints, Panthers, and Falcons coming up, so somebody's going to lose those games. But if you're Detroit, no matter how those fall in the NFC South, you still have to beat all of them by a game, because you don't hold any of the tiebreakers. So they hold their wild cards right now, and if the Seahawks win tonight, they'll be 8-4, so they'll be a game ahead of the Falcons. So now you have to leapfrog 3 teams in 4 weeks. Not happening.
No.
I know mathematically it's possible, but it's not happening.
No, it's not happening. No. So, safety Tavon Wilson is out for the rest of the season with a shoulder injury, and he will have shoulder surgery. The Pontiac Silverdome implosion backfires and fails, doesn't go as planned. That's what we heard this past Sunday afternoon. It is still Sunday when we're live doing this podcast here. But that's just another another historic playoff win, almost gone down the drain.
Wasn't a good omen if you're a Detroit Lions fan, because you look at that and you think, boy, we couldn't even do that. So it'll stand for another day while they try to figure out exactly what went wrong and try it again. I think tomorrow. I'm not sure on the logistics of that, but it's something that's just embarrassing. And it's something that, something attached to the Lions can happen. Because, it was surprising just because with all the advances and that kind of stuff now, you would think that it wouldn't happen, but apparently there's a wiring issue or something with some of the charges. They didn't go off as planned, obviously, so we'll give it another whirl. But just like the Lions of now, the Silverdome won't even go as planned.
Right. So they'll have to take a lot more TNT and dynamite and bombs to make this implosion a success later on in the future at some point. But all that cleared up, it's now time to transition from pro football to college football.
Touchdown, MSU!
We have some bowl selection updates to pass along to our audience. The Michigan State Spartans football team, number 16 ranked, will play in the Holiday Bowl on December 28th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time of this year against the number 18 Washington State Cougars. We're gonna preview each bowl game, but we're not gonna jump the gun with the college football and the Mitten Quick Picks segment because if we did that, we would just spoil it for our audience. So we're going to save that for later.
Yeah, and also to predict it now is it's a little tough because you have no idea what's going to happen in the next 25 days or longer. So guys can get suspended, guys can get hurt, guys can decide not to play.
Good point.
All of those things now can happen. But, the one thing I get out of the first thing you're talking about, which is the Holiday Bowl, is I love it. How Michigan State fans are getting bent on the fact that Michigan's going to the Outback Bowl and Michigan State's going to the Holiday Bowl. Number one, the Holiday Bowl is going to usually take the team that you would consider, I think it's 4th or 5th place now in the Big Ten. I think it's hilarious that Michigan State fans are getting bent because, number one, it's a better matchup than South Carolina as far as entertainment purposes. Number two, gives them a chance to go to California. They'll be home by New Year's. Number three, they get to go to California for Christmas. And number four, it doesn't matter what bowl you play in. If you're not playing in a New Year's Six bowl, it does not matter. Michigan playing in the Outback Bowl is no different than Michigan State playing in the Outback Bowl and vice versa for the Holiday Bowl. It doesn't matter.
It's on New Year's Day, by the way. It's against the South Carolina Gamecocks.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. The games are about how much money can they make. In the Outback Bowl, because Michigan has gone to that, in the Citrus Bowl quite a few times in the past 15 years, they know that Michigan sells tickets. And Michigan State has been to the Outback Bowl most recently against Georgia, and even though it was a great game, didn't sell as many tickets. And that's what they look for. How much money are they going to make? And that's why they pick Michigan, because Michigan, even though they are not as good of a football team, sells more tickets. They're a more recognizable brand. The end. So all this stuff about Michigan, it makes me chuckle because that's what Michigan State does. They play the disrespect card, and then they say, well, they want respect, even though they're not asking for respect because they feel disrespected. It's hilarious. Get over yourself. You're playing a good team in Washington State. It should be entertaining because Coach Mike Leach for Washington State gives great press conferences. Mark D'Antonio's defense is going to be tested to the max against Mike Leach's air raid offense. Luke Falk, the career leader in passing yardage for the Pac-12, he's going to be playing his final game. It's a great game. Who cares if it's not the Outback Bowl? Who cares if Michigan goes to it? It doesn't matter. Nobody except for you cares, Michigan State fan. You. The players don't, because they get to go to California instead of Florida. Whoop-de-doo. A free trip to a sunny place in the middle of December. I'm sure they're not complaining. I'm sure they don't care. So, for all the people on Twitter for all the people on Facebook and all other social media that think Michigan State got disrespected because Michigan got to go to the Outback Bowl. Michigan State had to go play poor old Washington State, who, if you remember, beat USC this year, who was the Pac-12 title winner. They get to play that team. Then I guess you're just not going to be happy. Because anything that's not in your sensible does not matter. It's all about how much money they can rake in. Because that's what those bowls are for, to rake in money. And that's what they do. So, that all said, I think that Michigan State playing Washington State, like I said, is going to be an entertaining matchup. I'm not going to make any predictions as of yet, but boy, my one prediction that I will make is I think it's going to be fun. Washington State runs that Mike Leach offense to almost perfection. They've had a couple of rough patches this year, but boy, when they're rolling and they can get moving the ball, it's tough to stop them.
Touchdown,
because they use it as a ball control
MSU!
mechanism. It's not just throwing the ball all over the place and trying to score 60 points. It's still a ball control offense now with Mike Leach, and they do it very well. And then Michigan State, on the other hand, a much more physical brand of football than Washington State's probably used to playing in the Pac-12 week in and week out. Stanford's a kind of a smash mouth team, Washington a little bit, but everybody else is not really a down-the-throat football type of team, which Michigan State is. So on the other side for Michigan State going against Washington State's defense, I think it'll be an interesting game there as well. So I think that's a good matchup. And these bowls, that's what they're about. They're about getting matchups that don't happen during the regular season and just trying to make it as entertaining as possible. And I think that with Coach Mike Leach at Washington State, they'll be trying some stuff because it's their last game of the season. I think that he'll empty the playbook, and I would expect Michigan State to do so as well. It should be entertaining, and we'll talk about that later on as far as predictions. But boy, I think it'll be a really good football game, and I think that Michigan State fans who are upset about not getting to play on New Year's Day are going to quickly forget that when they start watching.
We'll predict that in 2 weeks, actually, starting with the CMU game. Chippewas playing in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl against the Wyoming Cowboys on the 22nd at 4 p.m. Eastern. The Western Michigan Broncos and the Eastern Michigan Eagles don't play bowl games at all. Each don't play a bowl game. Western finished 6-6, and they ended up without a bowl game. But CMU against Wyoming, CMU finishing 8-4 after coming back from down 17-0 against the Northern Illinois Huskies, of all teams, and winning 31-24 at Kelly Short Stadium. That was going to be a good matchup, by the way, and they were down 17-0 at halftime, and they came back. Coach Bonamigo somehow gave them an earful. We discussed that last week, and now CMU going into a bowl game with momentum, not only into a bowl game, but with a better record than we anticipated and the momentum. They play the Wyoming Cowboys in the Potato Bowl.
Well, Wyoming has one of the top quarterback prospects in Josh Allen. They come in at 7-5. Chippewas at 8-4. Shane Morris finally gets to play in a bowl game, and this being his last college season, so he'll get to play his second bowl game. He did start the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl against Kansas State for Michigan those many years ago because they were bad. And this should be another fun game. These are the type of games I love to watch when it's bowl season. You can give me the New Year's Six games, and those are fine. But these are the kind of games, though, because, number one, it doesn't mean anything as far as overall standings or anything else like that, ranking-wise. Josh Allen's last game, potentially now, because of his prospects in the NFL draft, he did suffer a shoulder injury in their game against Air Force, and he's been kind of suffering through that because he's missed the last two games, and they lost to San Jose State, who was brutal, but they lost them in the last game of the regular season because Josh Allen wasn't there in part. So it'll be interesting to see with Josh Allen's stock in the NFL draft. I think he'll play because with him being hurt, they want to see how he bounces back, and they want to see him throw one last time before he gets to the Senior Bowl and some of those other games. So I think he's going to play. Whether he plays the whole game is going to be a different matter. But Central Michigan, with their effort against Northern Illinois, even if they don't beat Northern Illinois, I think they probably get into a bowl. It may not have been this one, but that said, it's great for Central to get to a bowl, get some guys some practice, and regardless of where you have to go, I know Boise isn't exactly the Bahamas or Alabama, where they were originally projected to go, but that said, they get to play against a highly touted prospect for the NFL and Josh Allen, at least for a while anyway, I'm thinking. And again, it's one of those games that's really fun because they'll empty the playbook, they'll do things that they normally don't do, and it makes football fun because it's what it's supposed to be. It's not playing to lose, not to lose, it's playing to win. And football coaches so many times play not to lose, and it's fun to watch them play to win because they take risks that they normally wouldn't take, and it makes for compelling football, which unfortunately in this day and age has kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. And it's fun to watch these type of games because they feature teams that you may not have seen over the year, and also players that can pop up on NFL radars because of their performances against teams in these types of games. So it's always a good thing to watch these bowls, and I think that Central Michigan will benefit overall. Again, you have to see on the prediction because we don't know what Josh Allen's plans are. If Josh Allen doesn't play, I would predict CMU in a rout because if they're losing to teams like San Jose State without Josh Allen, I can almost assure you Central Michigan, who is much better than San Jose State, is going to be able to do just fine. But we'll see what happens. But it should be a fun game to watch.
And to play to win, like you mentioned before, you got to knock out your opponent. You got to give it the Lennox Lewis 1-2 knockout punch like he did in Mike Tyson in 2002, the way Ed Smith mentioned it on his call to Valenti and Rieger last year in his preview of the Michigan State game in the East Lansing at Spartan Stadium. And I'm pretty sure you listened to Ed Smith's call to Mike Valenti and Jeff Rieger on 97.1 The Ticket just before 6 o'clock on that day.
Yeah, I remember that. And it's the same. Yeah, I mean, you play to win these games because if you lose or win, what does it matter? You're either 8-5 or you're 7-6. What's the difference? Not much.
Got to see what happens.
Yeah, just let it ride. I like the bowl games because of that. Let it ride.
Me too. We all do. So, transitioning from college football to college basketball.
Valentine for the win!
Man, oh man, the Spartans find yet another way to win against a top 10 team. This one at home against the 5th-ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The Spartans were number 3. They beat Notre Dame 81-63. That's the second game in a row that they beat at least a top 10 team by exactly 18 points. Last Sunday, they beat North Carolina, of all teams, number 9, 63-45. And then last week in East Lansing in the ACC Big Ten Challenge, they whoop on Notre Dame 81-63. Holy mackerel.
Well, I mean, you look at this team, and from top to bottom, they deserve to be there. Tanezzo's put together a really good group. He's had some guys that have matured over the years.
And they got play defense, too.
Oh, man. And that's the thing. You look at those teams, and holding North Carolina to their lowest field goal percentage as a school history.
Yeah, 25%.
I mean, that's a long history. I mean, I mean, that's incredible. And then they went against Notre Dame and played well defensively at home against them. And Notre Dame had come in on that game undefeated. And, boy, Michigan State just ran them over like a truck.
Defense wins games and championships, too.
It can, but the thing is they're explosive enough offensively to offset that. Because a lot of times with Michigan State, when they play the good defense, sometimes their offense will suffer because of that. Because they put so much emphasis on the defensive end that offensively they start to break down because they're working so hard on that end that they get the ball, and sometimes it hasn't happened for them. So it's a good balance for them this year. And boy, I mean, if you're in the Big Ten, look out because it's going to be a rough sled.
Yeah, and then
they played today and they smoked Nebraska, which is no surprise.
Yeah, 86-57. The Cornhuskers are not that good at all.
No,
and the Spartans kept them in check.
Nebraska's that team. Yeah, Nebraska's that team though in the Big Ten that always gives them problems.
Sure didn't give them problems tonight.
No, they gave no problem. The only problem they had was they had to play the game. That was about it. They smoked Nebraska, which was not really a surprise, but I mean, just overwhelming them. And I don't. When the rankings come out, I don't know how they're going to fare because you look at the teams ahead of them, Duke and Kansas. It's so tough to pick those right now, and these rankings really at this point mean not a whole lot. So, like I said, when you get into conference play, that's when I start to pay a lot more attention. But boy, Michigan State, with their last two efforts, has really shown me something. And then today against Nebraska, but those wins against North Carolina and Notre Dame were two really good teams, and doing it in convincing fashion. They've made everybody aware that Michigan State is here and a title contender.
So they're at Rutgers Tuesday at 7 on BTN, and then they go off the conference and play the easy teams down the road in December, and then we don't need to mention those.
Well, I mean, and then Rutgers isn't any good either, so they can't get a break here in the schedule after playing a really tough first part of their schedule, which they always do, because that's what they always do for scheduling is they make it tough because they want to find out where they stand, and sometimes that's hurt them and sometimes it's helped them as far as record, but they get back into cruise mode this week. They'll play Rutgers and then they'll play Southern Utah, so they're right back into easy street.
Rutgers game is Tuesday at 7 on BTN, and it's on the road. Spartans will just crush the Scarlet Knights, of course, and they'll crush Southern Utah, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I really don't see any problems for them until they get back into conference play. Now they do have Oakland in that game at Little Caesars Arena, that doubleheader with Michigan.
Speaking of Oakland, they stunned the Western Michigan Broncos 78-73 just this past Saturday.
Yeah, I just think that Michigan State's going to be too much for them. I mean, it's great for Oakland to be a team like Western, but boy, when you're playing Michigan State, it's a whole different ballgame, and I really don't see Michigan State having much of a struggle with them. I think that they'll be able to handle them with relative ease.
Mm-hmm. And then you get the Michigan Wolverines, speaking of which.
For three, yes, sir!
They lost to a very mad North Carolina team, speaking of which, the Tar Heels, 86-71 in North Carolina on Tobacco Road. And then they easily took care of the Indiana Hoosiers, 69-55 at Chrysler Center. In the post-Tom Crean years, Indiana is still not that good, like they used to be.
No, and the funny thing about Indiana is they had given Duke a run early in the week, and they played them down to the wire at Assembly Hall. And people got a little excited because they started off poorly. They got blown out by Indiana State in the first game, and people didn't really know where they were going. And then they gave Duke a run, and people got a little excited, but Michigan really put the screws to them. And Michigan, for all the things they did wrong against North Carolina, they did right against Indiana, and they'll play Ohio State tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. So they'll be a real tough for them because they have to go into enemy territory for a conference game.
Yep. Then they're going to play the Ohio State Buckeyes at Value Center in Columbus, Ohio, Monday at 6:30 on FS1.
Yeah, their schedule for Michigan actually gets a little bit harder. They'll play Ohio State, and they have UCLA coming to Chrysler Center.
Oh boy!
They'll go play Shaka Smart's Texas Longhorns on the 12th from Tuesday.
Look out!
And then they have that game against UD Mercy at Little Caesars Arena, that doubleheader with Oakland and Michigan State following that one. So schedule gets a little tougher for Michigan, but then they go back play two soft cupcakes before they get into the real Big Ten schedule.
I know what Michigan fans are thinking. Hey, that's not fair. Michigan State always gets the easy schedule after this, and for Michigan, they get a much tougher schedule. Sorry that appears that way for Michigan fans, the way they see their schedules and compare how easy to how tough and so on.
It doesn't matter until you get to conference play. It really doesn't. Right. I mean, you got to play some teams, and if you're Michigan, you got to put on your big boy pants and play a couple of teams that are good. UCLA a little bit down, but still a tough game for them, and then they're going to play Texas, who is hoping to get on the come with Shaka Smart after last year. So, those are two games, and you're going to Austin to play that game. So, we'll see how that goes. But, playing Ohio State tomorrow, that'll be a test for them because playing at Ohio State, Michigan has struggled at times when they've gone on the road to play Ohio State. Ohio State with a new coach as well. We'll see how that plan pans out.
Yep. So that's college basketball. We now transition to pro basketball.
Left sideline, 3 of the answers.
Pistons going to Boston and play the Celtics with Marcus Smart, and they beat the Boston Celtics 118-108. They brought a lot of offense. Andre Drummond, 26 points and 22 rebounds, including a 6 for 8 free throw shooting effort. The Pistons, we expected that game to be a very high scoring affair. There was both those two teams had very powerful high octane offenses that each defense could not handle, and the Pistons were more prepared than the Celtics were, just a little bit.
Yeah, I think that game was a real watershed game for them as far as finding out where they stand when they have to play some of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. The Celtics and the Pistons kind of had a little bit of a shootout, and the Pistons offensively the Celtics didn't have an answer. And they did just enough to win that game, did the Pistons, offensively and defensively. Then they went and played the Suns on Wednesday, blew them out because the Suns are terrible. But then they lost the next two. They lose to the Wizards by a convincing 109-91 margin. And then they go last night and lose to the 76ers. So this team is up and down. And having 4 games in a week seems to take a little bit of a toll on them because they had to play back-to-back against the Wizards and the Sixers.
Yeah.
And I think the Wizards game was a little bit more alarming than the 76ers game because the Wizards really dominated from tip to buzzer, whereas the 76ers, they put up more of a fight against them. And the 76ers as a team starting to finally get on the rise after so many years of being bad. But the Wizards really tore the Pistons apart defensively and were able to really do whatever they wanted, whereas the 76ers and the Pistons game the following night was a lot closer. The Pistons kind of ran out of gas in the fourth quarter, and 76ers ended up winning that one.
Yep, 108-103. But on a side note, Stan Van Gundy finally plays Boban Marjanovic for 3 straight games, starting with the Suns game. Boban was really rusty. He picked up 4 points, picked up 4 personal fouls, just had a rough go, but he was rusty because Stan Van Gundy hadn't played him in a while since Boban's second game, which was like almost in a month. but or like a half month or whatever. But he started playing Boban in consecutive games, 3 thus far, at the Wizards and then at the 76ers. Boban, and in the 76ers game, Boban Marjanovic appeared to play better defense against Joel Embiid than Andre Drummond played him. Remember when Andre Drummond told Joel Embiid on Twitter, "See you December 2nd," after Joel Embiid told Andre on Twitter that he can't play defense? Well, that actually happened to continue. Whereas in comparison, Boban Marjanovic made a stuff on Joel Embiid, a clean one, and forced a couple misses. Whereas Andre Drummond was just dozing off most of the time against Joel Embiid, who just kept burning him every time. Embiid seemed to continue owning Andre Drummond offensively over defensively, and whereas Boban Marjanovic was his height was just too much for Joel Embiid to get past into the hoop.
Well, I think that game for Andre Drummond, he kind of got caught in a little trap there. He tried to dominate on the offensive end against Joel Embiid, who they had a little bit of a running feud. But then they got to the defensive end, and boy, Joel Embiid really cleaned his clock.
Yeah. And
the Sixers rode that in the final quarter to come out on top. And I think that Andre Drummond probably had the better overall game as far as if you look at all of the stats, but Joel Embiid put 25 points up, and that ended up being a contributing factor to the fact that they ended up winning that game. So, that said, you're right, Boban's played 3 straight games. Van Gundy's got a little more trust in him. And I think that as the season wears on, knowing what he can do, and if you can get him into the games, albeit small increments of them, he can show a little bit of defense. And hopefully, if you play him more, gets more comfortable, and is able to do some things for them that neither Andre Drummond nor Eric Mullen can give them, which is height. Can't teach height.
No.
And as you mentioned, Boban did a fair job on Embiid defensively.
Yeah, at least.
And but again, they go back to Drummond and in crunch time, and Embiid ends up scoring 25 points overall.
Yeah. And not only do you have to play Boban more, you have to develop him more during practice every time. If you're the head coach, Stan Van Gundy of the Pistons, you just got to keep working with him. You got to keep developing him as a two-way player, not only on offense but on defense as well, especially on defense.
Yeah, because they want him to work on the defense, and that's why he hasn't played as much. But I think with his effort in the 76ers game, only a couple of boards and 6 points, but in limited time, like you said, defensively he was adequate, and that's what they're looking for. So we'll see what happens in the games to come. But I think that he's proven, as Boban, at least that he deserves some playing time, and he will go against his former team tomorrow when they go to San Antonio and play the Spurs.
Yep. Monday at 8:30 at AT&T Center, the Spurs are waiting. Then the Pistons go back to Milwaukee Wednesday at 8 against the Bucks. Then they're home at Little Caesars Arena Friday at 7 against the defending NBA champion Golden State Warriors, which they beat on the road last month, mind you, or 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago, rather. And then they're home against the Boston Celtics in a rematch Sunday at 4.
Yeah, those are going to be pivotal games because the Celtics and the Warriors, two very good basketball teams, are going to have some revenge on their mind. And the Pistons are going to have to come to play in both of those games because having played the Spurs and the Bucks prior, they're going to come home and they're going to face two really good teams. So a big week for the Pistons is they have another 4 games, and they get a break in between each one, but still, 4 games in 7 days is tough, and we'll see how that pans out for them. But the Warriors and the Celtics, those 2 home games, are really going to be measuring stick games for the Pistons in December.
Then they end their 3-game homestand against the Denver Nuggets a week from Tuesday on the 12th at 7 before going on the road to Atlanta and Indiana the 14th and the 15th. They're home on the 17th against the Orlando Magic at 4. So, that's Pistons. Now it's time to laugh at the Red Wings.
They gave them a home. They got taken to them in the last two periods. They ended up losing that game 6-3. But boy, the real nadir came yesterday, getting a dime hung on them, 10-1 on the anniversary, no doubt, of
What is that?
That December 2nd game in 1995 when Patrick Waugh got lit up for 9 goals, and that was his last game in a Montreal Canadian uniform.
Before getting traded to the Avalanche.
Yeah, 22 years later, the Canadians finally were able to return the favor. And, boy, I mean, it was just a terrible outing, obviously, for them. And, yeah, I mean, there's not much to say other than that was just a poor effort and a poor performance. But the Red Wings kind of are who they thought they were. And it just, they've lost 6 games in a row. Now they've got a couple of OT points in there, but a team with multiple 6-game losing streaks, that's not a playoff team. And for anybody to tell you different.
Lost 7 straight now.
Yeah, I mean, they're on 7 right now. They have the red-hot Winnipeg Jets coming in on Tuesday.
Make that 8 straight losses.
Well, yeah, not looking good for the Red Wings in the near future.
Oh.
They'll be playing St. Louis on Saturday.
They're a good team too.
And next week Monday, they'll be playing the Panthers. So the Red Wings,
and then the Boston
when you look at
Bruins.
the schedule, yeah, I mean, look at the schedule. They have all these home games. You got to get points in these. You got to be winning these games, and they're going the opposite direction.
In an arena which has had a lot of empty seats for most games. Home against the Bruins, and then on NBCSN a week from Wednesday, and then home against the Maple Leafs from Toronto a week from Friday. That's the 5-game homestand we're looking at here.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a lot of home games lately. Montreal was the last one, and then, like I said, they have more good teams coming in, and if you're not beating the Canadians and you're getting trounced by them, what's it say for the teams like the Jets and the Blues and the Bruins and the Maple Leafs, who are all right there as far as talent-wise? The Blues a little bit off, but still, I think a better team than the Red Wings.
I see the streak continuing all the way up to 12.
Yeah, I mean, your only real hope is playing against the Panthers on next Monday night to break that, because I don't think they're beating the Jets or the Blues.
Or the Bruins or the Leafs.
No.
But the Panthers have owned the Red Wings as of late.
Yeah,
so.
Florida's, I mean, even since Florida's been in the league, overall, they always had trouble with the Panthers have the Red Wings. And for whatever reason.
Vincent Trocheck?
Yeah, I mean, they've got a decent lineup. Yeah, that's the only game that you look at and say the Red Wings have a fighting chance at, because the Jets are just smoking hot right now. And like you said, the Bruins and the Maple Leafs also coming to town. Those are two teams that I think are superior to Detroit. So it's not going to get any better in the month of December.
Right. So that's Red Wings. They're 10-12-5 with 25 points, the 5th worst team in the East now, thankfully. The Arizona Coyotes got back Jacob Chikrin, and now they've won another game with him back in the lineup, and Jeff Moss is loving that one.
Well, of course, because you have guys that they've passed over for some less than stellar draft picks. I mean, you look at guys like Alex Brinkat, who they passed over for Dennis Cholowski and many other guys, but Alex Brincat, who is playing well for the Blackhawks right now, even though the Blackhawks are struggling overall.
Yeah.
He's playing well, and I just think that if you look at the schedule here, actually, I just took a look at the standings. The Blues are a lot better off than I thought they were. They're right behind the Jets at 36 points, and the Jets have 38. So, yeah, it's not looking good. And with the Red Wings continuing to shovel the lineup that includes Jonathan Ericsson and his merry band of clowns on defense, it's not going to get better. I mean, it's just going to be more and more stress on that defense to play these teams, and we've already known this for a couple of years now. This defense is not capable of handling those teams, and they're going to play a lot of them here in this stretch.
Yeah. And Urinating Tree on Twitter asked me, what the literal hell happened to Trevor Daley? Dude is looking cooked right now. And I replied to him, he hasn't done jack squat, of course, may I add. And he got injured once and quickly returned to the lineup and still hasn't done anything. Another stupid Ken Holland signing. And Jacob Chikrin is continuing to make Kenny Boy, as Ed Smith would put it, make him look like a fool continuously.
Yeah, I mean, he's contributing no offense at all.
No.
He's playing less than average defense, but they had to have him. They had to have him for some reason. And as you mentioned, just playing poorly, and not to absolve him of any blame, but the rest of the defense not doing so well either. And just another Ken Holland special. Let's sign a guy who's played back-to-back cup seasons with Pittsburgh, and he's a veteran, and he's played a lot of ice time for them, and he gets to Detroit, and he's cooked. Just another veteran that comes to the Detroit Red Wings, whose usefulness has gone by the wayside, but Detroit had to have him because he was a, quote, veteran. That was the only reason they picked him up.
Yep. Just another defenseman to block the prospects out. Kenny Holland fucking lost that trade last calendar year in the draft. Picked up Dennis Cholowski in the Datsuk trade. God damn it. Man. Well, that's Red Wings, and now one team left to cover, and that's the Tigers.
That one is long gone.
They finally got rid of Bruce Rondon. They decided to non-tender him for 2018, making him a free agent. Hallelujah. The roster is now down to 38, so the Tigers have to pick up two more guys to fill the 40-man roster, and hopefully it's especially a much better relief pitcher than Bruce Rondon, for crying out sideways.
Well, it doesn't take much to get better than him, and I think non-tendering him just another further signal that the Detroit Tigers are looking at a rebuild. And yes, it's true that he wasn't very good, and he probably would have came deep, but he's had multiple chances. He's had problems in the clubhouse. He's been a problem on the team with his behavior and his performance. So not surprising that they would non-tender him and make him an unrestricted free agent, because I'm sure he'll go on to spring training with another team and probably do well, because that's what usually happens to the guys that the Tigers let go.
Yep.
On non-tenders, but just in Detroit it never worked out for him, and a lot of it of his own doing. But that said, he's gone, and
he gone
for the Tigers' benefit. They don't have to deal with him anymore.
Because he's total and complete hot shit and hot garbage, psychologically and performance-wise. So, speaking of which, we're going to grade that move right now.
Pencils down, everyone. It's time to find out what's your
if you have
grade.
to look at what the Tigers have coming next season, it's not going to be pretty. Their roster is filled with guys who either A, haven't proven themselves, or B, have been given a chance or 12 to prove themselves, and they just haven't been able to do it. And I think for them to get rid of him, to open up the door for perhaps sign another free agent, albeit at a cheap cost, I'm sure you can find a guy that's better than Bruce Rondon on the free agent market. So the non-tender of Bruce Rondon from the Tigers, for me, gets an A+, because he wasn't doing anything for you. You tried multiple times with him. Nothing was working, and his time had come to an end. And so I grade that one an A+, because they need to get rid of him, and they finally did so.
Both Buck and I grade that an A+. The only other event, Pistons head coach Stan Van Gundy finally playing Boban Marjanovic for three straight games. Buck, I'll let you start again.
I'm going to give that one an A-, because you've got to get somebody like him in the rotation. Yeah. Because sitting at the end of the bench, as you mentioned, his first appearance in this season, he's been rusty. And the first game of the 3 that he played, he was rusty. And he only got better, as his playing time went up. Yeah, he's got a lot of room to grow, but he can't do it in practice. He has to do it in games. And Stan Van Gundy, realizing he's probably used Andre Drummond and Eric Moreland a little bit too much, started to rotate Boban in, albeit for small increments. So I'm going to give that one an A-, because I think that he probably could have done it earlier, but now that they've been able to do it, he's been able to show some value, and hopefully they'll be able to see that and continue to use him in specific situations, and hopefully he can knock some more of the rust off and begin to develop.
Yep. So that's our What's Your Grade segment. So for our audience, if they have a grade for each event, post them in the comment bank in this episode, and please don't go out of line. So that's episode 293 of the Week in Review of the Michigan Sports Truth on Spreaker, SoundCloud, and iHeartRadio. Before we sign off, we want to remind everyone that to share this episode and our entire podcast on social media, and have their friends share that as well, because we want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast is boosting its posts of each episode on its Facebook page and searching for a wider local audience that is fans of sports and local advertising sponsors. If anyone has a local business in the state of Michigan that has a passion for sports and is interested in sponsoring this podcast, send our Facebook page a message or post on our timeline. I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips, and Buck Geno on Twitter at BuckGeno3, 3 I's for Roman numerals. Like the Michigan Sports Truth Facebook page and join its Facebook group. Buck, we'll talk to you next week on episode 294.
Yes, sir.
Yep. So, to the audience out there, thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Bon appétit.
Transmission complete.